Hi guys. Hope all of you are good. In this episode of the series, what we are going to be doing is actually creating a web page which users see when they go to our site. As you can see at the moment, it's totally empty. Just as could not get. In fact, this is something that the middleware returns to us. Cannot get forward slash. In fact, if we try to do this, cannot do that. It will say cannot get that particular page because that particular page and routing to that page does not exist at the moment. So let's go ahead and create that. So before we continue, can I just add this to our gitignore file? We are going to add our .vs code page to our gitignore file. Should have done that earlier, but it's fine. So one thing that I'm going to do is I am going to separate our project out into logical folder structures. So what you need to understand is for our web application or client is going to exist separately. We could also create a mobile client or other types of clients later. So at the moment, what I will do is I'll just create a folder on the root of our project called web, right? And in this folder, what I am going to do is I'm going to go and create an index file, normal index.html file. So we're not going to be using any templating like Jade at the moment. We're going to be writing everything natively. Maybe at some point we'll use Jade or handlebars for our templates, but for now, we just want to keep it simple. So let's create a web page. So in fact, I could just copy and paste this, but you know what? It's fine. Our title for our page is going to be I told you so! Exclamation mark. So it's I told you so. And yeah, let's just close that off. Create a simple body for our page, and let's just add a paragraph in there that says, in fact, let's add a header that will actually display to the user, welcome to I told you so. Cool. So we've got our page up and running. Not up and running, but complete. So the thing is, what you guys are going to notice is if I try to navigate to that page, nothing happens, right? And that's because we haven't done any routing yet. We need to tell our server needs to know how to handle requests from a browser, a client from the internet, right? So we actually have to tell it when somebody requests this page, being this page, what should happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to create controllers. And if some of you are familiar with the MVC pattern, basically we're going to be using the MVC pattern to some extent to create some of our routing for this application. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a new section called cloud. This you could call, so in fact, web you could have called client, and this cloud you could call backend. But I have this habit of calling it cloud, and I'm finding it difficult to go back from that, but it's fine. You can decide whatever you want to call it. So in this cloud, one thing we want to control or create first is a folder called controllers. And basically in here, we're going to have any routing that comes from the client side of the internet will be routed to our controllers are going to handle that. So we're going to have one that handles actual page requests. At some point, we're going to be creating APIs, and these APIs are also going to be going into this particular file or folder. So for now, let's create a file called routes.js so that we can actually start doing some coding. So yeah, let's just start coding. So in here, what I'm going to do is I am going to export this function. So remember, guys, I did say that in this series, we're not actually going to be teaching how to code, but I will also try and basically just trying to teach you how to build applications. So I assume that you have a bit of knowledge, but I do know that some of you might not have knowledge on actually building JavaScript applications. Please ask questions, it's fine, I will answer those. But for the sake of everybody else, I'm just going to continue coding. Yeah. So we're going to create this function exported to our global scope, if I could say that. And in this function, we're going to have something that resolves get methods that come from this particular URL, meaning they're going to be coming from HTTP local host port 3000 and then this slash there. Some of them are going to be coming from help, some are going to be coming from FAQ. It doesn't matter, but in this case we're going to be calling them from anything that comes from the main or the home there. This is how we want to handle it. So we're going to define a function here, and the middleware will be giving us things like our request will contain headers that come from the client side, which will be able to pull things like data that the user sends as they're submitting their request, and the response is basically what goes back to the actual browser. Once the request has been resolved, they get a response. The client gets a response. So in here, at the moment, it's empty. What we're going to do is we've got a file that we want to send back to the browser, right? So our cloud will be hosted somewhere on the cloud, and the client, which is the web, will be running on the user's browser. So what we want to do is whenever somebody hits this URL, we want to respond with a file, right? And this file is something called index.html. So we've got a file called index.html. And one thing that I will be doing is that I could reference it directly using, like, for example, escaping and all of that, but there's an actual package in Node that allows you to do things like referencing folders and files using a particular in a particular way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import that library called, and I'm going to call it path, which is normally what I do end up calling it. Path. In fact, yeah. And I am going to basically tell it where my file is actually located. So for now, say root and then path.join, and then I don't know what I'm going to call this, but no, in fact, let's do this. And it's actually in, so we are here 1 2, so 1 2 and then web. Right, that looks sort of correct. So let's run it and see. I mean, there might be mistakes here, but we can run it and see how it fails, and we'll debug and troubleshoot and see how we can fix it. So one thing that you guys will have to note here is that, for example, there will be some things that look a bit funny. This path.join, join is a function within this path library, and this is actually, I don't know what I can call it, but it's not a function, but it's I don't know, can I say a constant that Node.js exposes that you can use to reference. So it'll actually append the path there, and from the path, actually, it will, I mean, from this particular location, you'll be able to do things like escaping back into a particular directory or moving into a particular directory. So another thing you'll have to note, guys, is if you do any changes in the cloud folder, you are going to have to restart your server. So in Visual Studio Code, all you have to do is just click that button there, and it will automatically restart your server. So let's run it. I expect this to fail, and I know why it'll fail, but I just want to show you guys how it fails, so at least you're aware of some of the issues that you might encounter. So if I do that, and I go, in fact, let's just restart that and do this. So actually it didn't fail. So let's see if it's actually resolving to our, oh yes, so the reason why it's not actually reading this particular file is because we haven't told our server about this particular root.js file. So what you guys are going to need to do in order for your server to know where this file is you're actually going to have to configure this root in your index.js file. So let's put it just before here. We'll have a section where we say configuration, routes. In fact, let's also say APIs. So in here, basically, we're just going to import or configure that particular new file that you just created. We're telling our application that there is a file in this particular. So I'm going to actually reference it from, yeah. So we're telling it that, look, there is a file in our cloud controllers, and it's called routes.js. And one thing you guys will note is that you don't have to provide the extension in this case. Node kind of understands what you're trying to do. So I'm going to put app in here, and I'm going to explain to you guys why I'm actually putting app in there. And the reason why I'm doing that is because what this does is actually it's going to go into our routes.js, and it's actually, this function is what it's calling. So it's saying whatever we define there, and it's expecting a parameter to get passed in, and that's why I'm actually in here. I'm saying I'm requiring this particular file, and because it's been exported in the global scope, I'm actually passing in that app function, which is our actual application in there. So I can reference, I can do things like, so I've passed in app in there, so I can do things like app.get and other things within the application module that I want to access. So let's restart and see what happens now. I expect it to crash again, but I just want you guys to see what happens. Oh, in fact, it didn't even crash. Cool. So it worked. In fact, I thought we would have to install that path library. Oh, but I think because it is a Node.js library, it comes with Node. I could be wrong, but that's why we didn't actually have to install it into our Node modules. Or maybe one of our other applications might have acquired it, and that's why we don't have to do that. But anyway, we'll have to research that and get our facts straight, or I will have to get my facts straight. But anyway, there's our page. So we actually have just created a page. Welcome to I Told You So. And another cool thing I'll show you guys is that with Visual Studio Code, you could do things like breakpoints, right? So if someone does actually go and resolve into that page, you will see that it puts a breakpoint in there. You can do things like actually viewing the request that came from the server. So it tells you about the server that, you know what, the person executed a get method, or the web client executed a get method. You can go in here to see headers. It will tell you the content type that was passed in, the type of browser that the user is actually using, all these cool things that you can actually use to enhance and build your awesome application. So I'll show you, for example, I went to the root, but sometimes I will be going to help, and you'll see if I go to help, hit enter, it says I cannot get help because help is not being defined within our routes. And that's as simple as that, guys. So we've actually created our first web page, and we've created a root and a controller for our application. So yeah, next time we will be extending a bit on top of this. We might be creating APIs. I don't know. We'll see what we do the next time. So thanks for tuning in, guys.